And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, or along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, didn't do our podcast. You fell victim to COVID, didn't you?
I did. It's the second time I've had COVID. It was a miserable experience. I don't recommend it. Um, but this is here to stay now.
Was it better or worse than your first experience?
This I'm not sure. The first time I had COVID was actually before we knew what it was.
Oh, wow.
So there was a lot of questions as to whether what I had. And this we knew was COVID because there's testing now. Um, it took longer to get over. Partially, I think, because everybody in my family had it all at the same time, so we were all sort of trying to take care of each other.
And
But
cross pollinating as things went
right,
on, yes.
but it was a miserable experience.
Well, we're going to, as we prep before the podcast, we're going to get into something that happened last week. But while we are talking about COVID, your thoughts on its kind of mask mandates are being now kicked around more. It sounds like COVID's having a resurgence in terms of the political and social debates. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it is having a resurgence. It shouldn't. Yes, it is going to be out there forever, like the flu is. Every year, a new variant is going to show up. But there was a new study that just came out that showed that there are compounds in masks that can cause cancer. And this is, the environmental movement is pushing to get rid of, and I'm blanking, BHPs.
Okay.
Um,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's found
and
in the plastic bottles and stuff.
right. Well, it's also found in the masks that the mask mandates are pushing.
Beautiful.
So, yeah. So, yeah, don't the masks are not effective. They are now proven to be dangerous, and yet the left is now pushing again for mandates, pushing
I
again
have
for
to interject
lockdowns.
something really quickly. I think I don't care if people are more liberal or conservative. I think that shit, excuse my language, is not going to fly. People are not going to revisit Armageddon again. Been there, done it.
No,
And
and not
politically, if Biden thinks it's something that he can use to rally the troops, it's again going to fall flat on its face.
yeah, it's not just been there, done that. People now know about all of the negative impacts. We
Yes.
have this study about the masks. We know the damage it did to our kids in school. We know all of and we know how ineffective the mask mandates and the lockdowns were. So people are not going to put up with it again. And honestly, I think the only reason that anybody would be pushing this is to give Biden the opportunity to campaign from the basement again so
Oh,
he
no,
doesn't
no,
have to go
absolutely.
out.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not even me beating a dead horse or whatever. You can see it, and it's really scary. It's funny, but it's scary that I think he's so deteriorated. He's incapable of a debate, and he was incapable of governing, but he's also incapable of just basically debating, campaigning, or governing. And I think we're going to
Well,
talk
I
about
mean,
this.
even
Go ahead.
even more than that, we just saw on his trip to Hawaii, he's incapable of staying awake.
Ab- Absolutely. I think that, speaking about Hawaii, we're going to get into that in a second here. Um, I believe, yeah, he didn't show up for 2 weeks because he was on the Delaware beach. But I think, yeah, a part of that, or a big part of it, in my mind, is that his advisors, the handlers, were scared to death of putting him there because as it happened, he was going to say something stupid, something that wasn't accurate, you name it. Am I not correct?
You are. He made up an entire story about a fire at his Delaware home, that he almost lost his wife and he almost lost his car, and
And his
when
cat,
and his cat, yes, and when the facts came in, it was a minor fire in his kitchen and
like a
nobody was in
toaster
danger.
oven, by the
Yeah,
way. Yes.
nobody was in danger of anything. He made the entire story up.
And worse than that, just dovetailing on that, uh, not only did he make the bullshit story up, okay, which is becoming kind of pathological with him, okay? He's really incapable of feeling human emotion. I'm not trying to play Mr. Amateur Psychologist here, but we saw that with Afghanistan and other areas, right? He and bringing up Bo. How many times you have to hear about Bo? But the other thing is, he has to, instead of just being genuinely concerned, I am so sorry this happened. It is awful. We'll do her. He has to always related to him. He's so self-centered. He is not Uncle Joe. We've already talked about that. He's one of the most insensitive, egocentric SOBs I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot in the political world. He actually, I would be so pissed, okay, if I was an Hawaiian that lost loved ones, my house, my livelihood, and he's friggin' talking about a friggin' cat and is losing, basically lying. And the other thing about it, Dr. Lotkin, he says yes. He also talked about the bravery of the fire department and how they came in and rescued, and he gave him high fives. He wasn't even there. He was in Washington.
Yeah,
That's scary, my friend.
he makes up these stories. And obviously, though, he's trying to put some effort into creating these stories. Because when he was first asked about Hawaii, he said no comment. He couldn't even come up with a lie. So, I mean, this is not somebody who is empathetic. He created this myth of Joe Lunchpail, that he cares about the. He's never cared about anybody but himself.
No doubt. And if it was Trump or any or George W., how was he treated with Katrina? What he did in Hawaii, there'd be calls for his head if it was anyone else, and it was highly underreported. Uh, and I think after that, basically, the handlers, the political power brokers in the Democratic Party are scrambling now because they are scared shitless, excuse my language, of having anything to do with him, that is Joe Biden, having anything to do with any kind of political discourse. It would be an abject disaster.
Yeah, he's not capable. He
He will
hasn't been
not debate,
capable
by
the
the
whole
way.
time. Yeah, that the rumor is that he will find a way to get out of debating his Republican opponent. And honestly, I think if he does get out of the debate, that's the end of it. Because the Democrats who refuse to cross the aisle to vote Republican will stay home. The Democrats will come out against Joe Biden, because how dare he not debate?
Well, you'd have to say if you were a political advisor of him, I would advise him that I'd arrange some way somehow.
Well,
He can, if he ever debates. Okay, it's a two-edged sword. If he doesn't debate, it's the end. If he does debate, it's the end.
and
Can you
honest,
imagine him
honestly,
on the?
if I were his political advisor, I would advise him to step down from the election and not run for re-election. Hand it over to Gavin Newsom. He's an idiot as well, but he's the best that the Democrats seem to be able to come up with.
Okay, real quick on that. There was talk that Gavin Newsom and the esteemed governor of Florida, DeSantis, was going to debate. I think that also. Not that I'm a big DeSantis fan. That would be the end of Newsom because he's really not all that. He's obviously he doesn't have dementia like Biden, but he's not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. I don't know who arranged it, how it came about in terms of at least a discussion point, but that would be the end of DeSantis too.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, of
Of
Newsom.
Newsom. Yeah. All DeSantis has to do in a debate with Newsom is keep showcasing the statistics of how many people have left California to move to Florida.
Yeah, Newsom is not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. He is a good look. He's like, this is not my own thinking. This is, I've heard this somewhere else. He's right out of central casting. If you were going to cast, the movie, The President Number Two, or President Number Two, whatever that movie was. Okay, so this is the another version of that. He's right out of central casting. He's good looking. He's tall. All the above, but dumber than rocks.
Dumb as a stump. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes. So we have, yes, we have the liar in chief going to Hawaii, but we also have something that I would, and I'm sure our listener would really love your comment on, Dr. Lopkin, is the craziness of the left. First of all, we start with the Hawaiian Power Company, that you were focused on new green initiatives, then doing what they should have been doing all along was cleaning out the invasive brush that caused the fires to begin with. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, this has been from the day the wildfires started. The left has been yelling that it was climate change. Well, now it turns out climate change had absolutely nothing to do with this. This was a complete failure by the Hawaiian Power Company, and they are being sued by the state of Hawaii because they neglected to clean the brush, they neglected to do the proper upkeep on their wiring, and what happened? The wires gave out, the power caught the brush, wildfires ensued. This had nothing to do with climate change. This had nothing to do with any denying of climate change. This was the power company failing to do their job. And
Yes,
I have
incompetency, but
actual
wait, incompetency, but also a misguided effort and focus. Instead of doing what power companies should do, that is called maintenance, okay, to prevent these types of disasters, they were 100% focused on green initiatives. That's like, okay, I need to pay the mortgage, but I'm going to learn how to play tennis. It's like, really?
Well, I mean, even more than that. I mean, literally, what they were doing was trying to rebuild the house while the fire was burning. I mean, you can't do that. You have to stop the fire first. You have to prevent the fire. Then you can move forward. They failed to do this. And actually, I have heard that this may be classified as negligent manslaughter.
I think rightfully so. But let me just be clear for a second on what I meant by my previous comment is yes, during the fire, we're going to talk about that, the negligence and misguided ideologies, but leading up to the fire, they negated or they neglected their day-to-day duties in favor of the Green New Deal, climate panacea to the detriment and to the lives of thousands of people.
Yeah, it's absolutely inexcusable. And the so-called Inflation Reduction Act,
God.
which had nothing to do with inflation, it was all about spending on green technologies, celebrated its first anniversary. Well, it hasn't done in a year anything. The left keeps blaming everything on climate change. Well, you just spent $1 trillion. Where is it? Where are the results?
I would say delivering dollars to the actual things on the ground, shovel ready, as Obama said. I would be aghast if it's anything more than 20 cents on the dollar.
I, probably. It is absolutely inexcusable that they wasted all of that money and they have accomplished nothing.
Nothing. Now let's talk about the warped ideology, increasingly warped and actually insane ideologies of the new left and the Democratic Party. Um, there were people, as the fire was engulfing people and killing people in Hawaii, officials are in charge, or I should say, charged with dealing with these crises and disasters were more. This is something out of a B movie of the 70s or something. They were more worried about equity and fairness. That is beyond troubling.
Yeah, the comments
That is,
from the comments
go
from
ahead.
the water department were absolutely inexcusable. Rather than releasing the water needed to fight the fire, they were debating for hours about whether or not they should release the water or whether it needed to go to other farmers. And it is absolutely inexcusable. You know what? Yes, I understand the farmers need water, but the farms aren't going to be there if they burn down.
There you go. But that's the warped ideology that is driving the left. And by the way, I do not recall his name now, the water czar, whatever. I think he should be brought up on charges. That's beyond gross negligence. That is negligent homicide.
Yes, it is. And it is absolutely inexcusable. It is amazing. Now, I have heard, I don't know a lot about how the government of Hawaii, the state government of Hawaii and the government of Maui works, but I have been told by those that do know that it is notorious for nepotism and for favoritism. And instead of putting people in positions that they're qualified for, it goes to somebody's nephew, it goes to some donor. Now, that's not necessarily a surprise with our politicians, but we have just seen the worst possible outcome of this.
No question. Well, speaking of visiting events of tragedy and events of noteworthiness and historical significance, did you know, Dr. Lopkin, that our esteemed president, Uncle Joe and Amtrak Joe, will be the only president not to acknowledge or commemorate 9/11 at one of the events?
Yeah, it is absolutely
Despicable.
amazing. It is despicable. I I mean, on the one hand, I understand given how he was booed last year why he doesn't want to do it, but guess what? You ran for president. It's not all bells and whistles. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. This is something he needs to show up for. And the fact that they're even talking about him being in Alaska on 9/11 rather than at one or multiple sites, which, let's face it, Trump, Obama, and Bush have all been at multiple 9/11 sites on that date. For Biden not to be at any of them, it is disrespectful to the military. It is disrespectful to our first responders. It is disrespectful to those who lost their lives on 9/11. And given that he handed Afghanistan back to the Taliban, it just highlights how incompetent he is.
Yes, I agree on all of what you've said, all the points that you've just mentioned. I also think, yeah, last year he got booed. I think given the year he's had, the boos might even turn into heckling, like total disrespect, like almost like a comedy show. Plus, I also think that he's, as we just already talked about, his mental acuity is just now basically at about close to zero. So I'm sure his handlers would be scared and are scared to death, want him as far away, which is essentially Alaska, away from any 9/11 site, because if he gave a speech, even if it's a teleprompter, and as soon as he goes off the teleprompter, he could. I'm just literally 3 years ago. I would just say it as a joke, but now it's not so far from reality. He could go off teleprompter and say, "Yeah, I know what it feels like to experience this. Jill and I basically had a plane crash into our house." No, I mean it's not that far from reality.
Actually, it would not surprise me to hear him claim that he was at the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Or yes, or Bush called him to wanted his insights. Oh yeah, something like that. And I think that's a real reality. Yes, it's comical, so to speak. It's troubling, but it's comical. But I think his handlers said we cannot, and it's going to increasingly become the norm. He's going to be at the beach. He's going to be doing because he is literally incapable of interfacing either with a teleprompter or Godfrey. He hasn't done a formal press conference in almost 2 years, and that was a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, the closest he's come, he gave an it. The last thing he did was he gave an interview to the Weather Channel.
There you go. That's a hard hitting, and he screwed that one up too. And speaking of lying in liar in chief, Trong Thurman, who was a senator back in the '60s. All right, and he was a big segregationist. And during 1965, Johnson was putting his Voting Rights Act through the legislative process. And Mr. Thurman, the senator, I don't remember where he was from, basically was filibustering the initiative. And wouldn't you know, at an event only a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Biden said that it was he who talked the senator down, Thurman Thurman, and basically got him to change his mind and go along with the 65 Voting Rights Act. Unfortunately for Mr. Biden, and not reported in the mainstream press, of course, Mr. Biden was about 20 and going to college.
Yeah,
There
it's
you go.
another one of his stories that he makes up. It doesn't even make. I've said this before. It doesn't even make any sense why he's making these stories up. There's no gain to it.
Yeah, but when you're a pathological, it's like the George Costanza. We already talked about that. Like that was a
Yeah,
funny part about Seinfeld is that that was the thing that used to crack me up because there was no reason to say that you're a Mensa candidate or that you were a
marine
marine
biologist.
biology.
Yes.
That's it. But that was made it so funny, and that's the same thing with and it really goes down to the fact that I think to his core he feels highly inadequate.
Well, he is highly
Oh,
inadequate.
of
And
course, yes.
to go further with the George Costanza comparison, everything Biden has done has been wrong. So, by definition, if he were to do the opposite, it would be right. And that's what he needs to do. He needs to do the opposite of everything he's been doing.
Yes, if he was capable or intellectually on board, I would say possibly so. Now, here I would just say your comment kind of going a little askew here, but Newt Gingrich said on a show in an interview that he believes that Obama and his minions are really the ones at the helm. I wouldn't be surprised
I
in the Biden administration.
His minions, yes. He himself, I don't think so. Um
Agreed.
I mean, I know for a fact that the Obamas and the Bidens did not get along. And I don't think that Obama would be taking any efforts that Biden would be able to take credit for. Now, that being said, the folks in the Biden White House are the same people who were in the Obama White House. So, yes, it's the same people who are controlling it.
But now they've given a
But,
license to steal because you have no one at the helm. At least Obama
right.
was at least pragmatic enough to know we can't have completely open borders, and the list
Ex-
goes on.
exactly. Now the inmates are running the asylum, but no, I don't think Obama himself has anything to do with what's going on. In fact, I think Obama would prefer for Biden to fail miserably.
Why is that?
just because they did not like each other, they had no respect for each other. Obama knew all about Hunter Biden. Obama warned Joe about Hunter. And I don't think Obama wants to have anything to do with the Biden White House.
I
I mean,
believe you are 100% correct. I think his minions are the little socialists at the White
yes.
House. Yeah, they're all on board and they're running the show. The inmates are running the asylum. I do agree with you. I think Obama hated, had no respect for Biden. I think Biden that was not. I think Biden did respect Obama, but who really cares? All I know is that Obama thought that Biden was a complete moron, and he basically said, "Don't underestimate Biden's ability to f things up."
Yep.
Everything he's ever touched, including college, he has accomplished nothing. The only reason he won the presidency by default.
Yeah, people came out to vote against Donald Trump because Trump was so polarizing. They also came out because they were abjectly lied to. As Biden campaigned, he was going to be the grown up in the room. He was going to bring people together. He's done nothing of the sort. He has not been the centrist that he campaigned on. He essentially just rolled over for the left.
Yes, he actually pours gasoline on the wound. Um, Interesting. Looking at the political environment, and this was, I thought it was awesome. I saw it on both Newsmax and Fox. Videos of African Americans, blacks. It was hysterical. Basically, just steamrolling over the left and the Democrats and Biden, and it's showing up in the polls that support for Trump in the black community is not just a trickle or not something just to take note of. It's becoming substantial. Fascinating. And Biden cannot win without, like he had in 2020, substantial black activity or support or voting participation. I mean, it's really substantial. It's over 20% support for Trump. That's unbelievable.
It is substantial because the African American community, first of all, are looking at Biden and going, "What have you done for us? You've done
Yes.
nothing. You have insulted us racially time and time again." But they're also looking back at the Trump administration and realizing that there were huge gains for the both the African American and Hispanic communities during the Trump administration. Record low unemployment in both of those communities, which, Biden is claiming to have record low unemployment. No, Biden is just benefiting from an economy that is slowly, very slowly catching up to where it was before COVID
In
during the
spite of
Trump.
Biden and his policies.
Yes, and Biden's policies have actually made things much worse. And it has nothing to do with race. The average American family is paying $700 a month more for the same necessities that they were getting before Biden took office.
So you're
$700.
telling our listeners that the Inflation and Reduction Act isn't working? It was
Not
a
only
joke.
is it yeah, not only is it not working, Biden, I mean, the only thing that Bidenomics has been good for is physical fitness. Because under Bidenomics, Americans are now capable of lifting $200 worth of groceries with one hand.
I like that. Great metaphor. Yes, it's true. Um, so yes, I think that he's going to have to certainly do something because. And the other thing about the black community that I thought was awesome, and this gets to the whole indictment rampage with Trump. Crazy. I never would have thought that would happen. Blacks, African Americans, basically are relating to Trump being screwed over by law enforcement or the judicial system.
Yeah,
Wild.
yeah. they are seeing that yes, there is a two-tiered system of justice, and it's not just racial. This is a system that goes after whoever they think is a danger to them. And this is the left in control of the Justice Department. This is the left in control of the justice system. And African Americans are going, wait a minute. They're doing the same things to him that they tried to do to us.
100%. I never thought that would happen. I thought some of the videos were awesome. I There was one woman that lost her son to violence, and the DA in New York, I forgot his name, the one who's indicting Trump, did
Alvin
jack shit
Bragg.
to the did jack shit to him. She was so articulate. And the other thing, you talk about inflation. Well, who does that hit or impact? It doesn't hit that hard at Martha's Vineyard. It hits really hard in North Philadelphia, in the Bronx, in Camden, you name it. The underprivileged, the underserved, blacks, minorities, Hispanics. So they're the ones. It's not your professor at UCal. It's your, I don't know, African American that's trying to get themselves out of poverty. That's what it's crushing, and it is crushing.
Yes, it is. And Biden's policies have made things so much worse across the board. But when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and it doesn't matter what race you are, when you live paycheck to paycheck, inflation hits you harder. And now there is a much greater number of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. And they're looking at Biden's policies going, this has crippled us. This is killing us. This is why 77% of the country has a negative view of Joe Biden and his economic policies. I didn't think you could get 77% of Americans to agree on anything.
I think that is hysterical, and it's hysterical to me because you're talking about administration and his little socialists at the 25-year-old Ivy League grads, socialists in his administration running the show. They actually are so out of touch that they coined the term Bidenomics, a play on Reaganomics of the '80s, when in fact you are correct. There's only 23% of those polled, and it was a recent McLaughlin poll that have a favorable, and they must have been basically just on prescription marijuana or something. But 23%, and the audacity to come out with Bidenomics, it's hysterical.
Well, no, they actually did not come up with Bidenomics.
Oh
Bidenomics
no,
was
the Wall Street Journal.
yes,
You're
was
correct,
coined
but
coined by
to
the Wall
run
Street
with it.
Journal, and it was supposed to be an insult. And they just decided, you know what, we're going to run with it. That's a great term. Well, it's not a great term for him. People know that his economic policies are disastrous.
If you don't know that, I don't know. I got a bridge to sell you. So speaking of the political environment, very interesting. The move to ban Trump to get on ballots has basically just came out has fallen flat on its face. And then something that is really surprising, genuinely surprising to me, in spite of the indictments and all yada yada yada, McLaughlin, um, a highly credible polling source, has a latest poll that Trump dominates Biden 47-43, and it's even worse, well, worse for Biden, but it's worse if you look at if a third party joins the fray, and that's increasingly likely given the fact that I believe in April, No Labels is going to nominate someone at their conventions. Your thoughts? And with that, hold on. And in that same poll, 67% of people in that poll believe that overall the country is going in the wrong direction. 64% believe that the economy is worse than when Biden took over, and as we already know, is almost beating a dead horse. But only 37% have a favorable impression of the VP. Those are not great numbers to run by, are they?
No, they're not great numbers. And that's actually why we've seen so much court activity, because the left knows they are going to get wiped out in
Electrocuted, yes.
2024. They have done a disastrous job. So, what are they doing? They took to the courts to try to keep Trump off the ballot. They took to the courts to try to keep no labels off the ballot. And I mean, fortunately, they have no standing to do this. The courts have decided yes, Trump can be on the ballot. Yes, no labels is perfectly capable of putting candidates on the ballot. They're already on the ballot in 13 states, and they are working to get to all 50. And the left is terrified because they know nobody is coming out to vote for Joe Biden.
Wait a second. You know something? That is a point that needs to be further highlighted because yes, the polls are static, meaning it just talking about people who answered the phone say yes or no. I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm not. I'm voting for Biden. Yes, no. But enthusiast. There's no way anyone's going to run out and jump for joy for Joe Biden. I mean, the participation rate, the enthusiasm gap is not reflected in the polls, and I think that further exasperates Biden's chances.
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons the Biden administration is desperately trying to push through student loan forgiveness, because it is a massive bribe to younger voters who don't want to turn out for him.
They're not going to turn out for him anyway because their their favorability, their view of Biden and his policies is really, really souring. You're young. I was once, a 25-year-old. You want to start your life, and they're looking at inflation. They're looking at America's decline. They're not, even with the dumbing down of America, they're not digging this.
They're not digging
They're
this.
the they're the ones who are going to live the future, not us.
And especially for younger voters, they're looking at inflation, they're looking at how much everything costs, and now they're looking at the fact that over the course of the Biden administration, starting salaries are going down. Companies are not paying these huge bonuses they were paying a couple of years ago because there was a worker shortage. Now they're not going to be making the money they thought they were going to.
Yes, very interesting. Yeah, they're slashing pay, and a poll that just came out is that the ADP, which measures payroll, basically looking at not a poll, basic information. It just came out today that job growth is slowing faster than expected. So the real question is if Uncle or if Amtrak Joe is at 42% now, if black support of him is plummeting, you dovetail that with not even, it doesn't even have to be a recession, just slowing, because all he has is the economy. Because let's face it, I mean, the job market is good, but with a slowing job market, he's toast.
Yeah, he's got nothing to pin his hopes on other than the claims of a strong economy. And the economy part, we do not have a strong economy, but we do not have a weak economy. We have parts of the economy that are still strong. We have parts of the economy that are weak now. But now you're also seeing that it's too expensive to buy a home now, thanks to rising interest rates.
Yes.
Inflation is still going up. They keep claiming that inflation is going down. No, their own numbers. And I keep harping on this, but it cannot be said enough. Inflation has not gone down. The rate that it is going up has slowed, but it has still not gone down. So when you we saw in the last inflation report, it was up 3.8% year over year. That's 3.8% from the 7% that it was up a year ago. So it's not going down. It's harder for people to afford things. And it all falls to government spending.
I could not. You. It's impossible to argue that, and very interesting. But yet, the liar in chief claims he has nothing to do with the DOJ's indictment fervor. Yet the White House logs have documented that uh, uh, Smith and others are frequent visitors to the White House. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, we've got the White House logs that have now shown all of the goings on at the White House that Biden claims to know nothing about. We have the National Archives unveiling over 5,000 emails that Joe Biden sent to Hunter Biden using pseudonyms so that people wouldn't know it was him.
Wait, wait, wait. I
Every,
have to comment on that. No, because I find it hysterical. Because you have a boy genius, Joe Biden, Amtrak Joe. If anyone is like, he's not exactly James Bond. The aliases, like emails aren't traceable, like they don't stay forever. Um, the question is, Dr. Lopkin, where's this going? I think this increasingly has legs. And what does it do to Trump's um, situation? I think you have bullshit and then you have reality, and this is real. I think if you have, I think we are going to have an impeachment, a formal impeachment inquiry that's going to free up documentation and other things, and the press is not going to be able to walk away from that.
no, we're going to see more and more investigations as we've seen more things come out. And I heard some very astute legal analysis yesterday about the fact that even the judges in the various Trump cases are not specifically following the law. And there was one of the cases yesterday was determined it was going to start the day before Super Tuesday. But according to legal experts, the judge that scheduled that actually jumped the line so that his case would be heard before some of the other cases that Trump has, which he's not allowed to do. So you have all of this political mumbo jumbo going on. Everybody's trying to get their 2 cents in. Meanwhile, there is going to be a real investigation by the House Oversight Committee as to what's been going on with Hunter and Joe, about 5,000 emails that were kept, and
Aliases.
aliases,
Yeah, why do you have an
lies.
alias?
And
Yeah, okay.
And now you also have the former Ukrainian prosecutor that Joe Biden bragged about getting removed. He's now coming forward and saying, yes, he was investigating Burisma and Biden took him out because Hunter was on the board. And now, allegedly, I have not heard this, but the rumors are that a recording that we found out existed a while ago is now going to come to light
Yes, let me
about
comment on that. I was watching. I love him, by the way. Don't get a chance to watch him enough. Greg Kelly on Newsmax, basically articulating exactly what you were saying. And the only reason I interject and bring that up is because he says he has the sources. The Biden administration knows it's out there, and it's going to be coming. It's going to be surfacing in the next couple of months. And the interesting thing, I'm not, I don't know. I'm just saying it was pretty much food for thought that his analysis was that Biden already knows he's finished.
It's very
It's all
possible. Although,
speculation. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I
it's all
mean that's why you have.
speculation
Go ahead.
until we hear the recording. It's all speculation.
Okay, let's
Does
assume there is a recording and it is black and white.
Yeah, that could very well be the end of the Biden presidency. Now,
And let me ask you, I got to
does
interject one other question.
Does Joe
Okay.
Biden know he's finished? It's so hard to tell what he doesn't know anymore. That I can't even guess.
Okay, but does the Democratic establishment breathe a sigh of relief? They'll kick and scream and pretend, but doesn't that give them the excuse to say, Uncle Joe, Amtrak Joe, you did a great job, you were a good placeholder, but bon voyage. Food for
I
thought.
Yeah, I don't know if they breathe a sigh of relief or not. I mean, I know the average Democratic voter will breathe a sigh of relief because in recent polls, 67% of Democrats have said they don't want Joe Biden running again.
And it's only getting worse.
Yeah, I know Gavin Newsom will breathe a sigh of relief because he'll throw his hat in the ring immediately. Um,
I think he's one of these flash in the pans, held up to the light of day. Gavin Newsom will be like a cockroach heading for
yeah,
the nearest crevice.
all
I mean, how do you run on a record like that? Please. It's
no,
like Keith
all
Richards
any
doing drug rehab.
all any opponent has to do is say, look at what Gavin Newsom has done to California. Do you want him to do the same to the rest
It's
of the
all you need to
country?
do,
That's it.
100%. Now, closing on a kind of a lighter note, because he's one of my least favorite politicians, because he's an example of checking the boxes. Uh, Mayor Petey, the big climate activist, the no show for anything he's supposed to do, uh, airline emergencies, basically is hemming and hawing for releasing his private jet logs. And there was something about a year ago about traveling on Air Force airplanes and helicopters that was kind of brought to the surface. He tried to poo-poo it. I guess the only reason I bring it up is that he's a hypocrite. We already know that. But is he basically done? Hopefully, you're going to say yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Please make it
I
done. Please stop.
I I don't think anybody is going to stand up and tout his record of achievement.
You never could.
He has failed at everything he was supposed to do. He was more he was more determined to fix equity issues than he was transportation, which was his actual job. He is Captain Green Energy, except when it means he would have to fly coach.
That is
He it,
correct.
I mean, it's the same with John Kerry flying
They're
jets all
elitist
over the
scum,
place.
and it's what we've said when you're talking about socialists or far left liberals. It's do as I say, not as I do. And what's good
Exactly.
for you is not good for me. Well, Dr. Lopkin, I am glad you're back. I'm glad you're feeling better. Missed you last week. I'm sure our listeners did as well. And maybe talk about a little bit about how our listeners can give their input and where they can access the Carnivore Bite podcast.
Yes, if you'd like to let us know what you're thinking about and what your opinions on these issues are, you can catch us at the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Message us there, as well as going to the xvadio.com website. Go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you think. We love to hear from you. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites as well as the rest of the Xvadio podcast network at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.